Okay. As ever, bear with me. You know, even when I'm not being like, oh, I should get some books, I should do a book haul, even when that's the last thing on my mind. It just happened, okay? It just happened. I did my best. It was apparently unavoidable. I have I believe it's called a problem, and it's fine because there are like 50,000 of you that seem to share my problem of whatever the fuck this is. Anyway, hi, welcome back to my channel. Or hello if you're new, my name is Emma, filmmaker, complet grad, and problem haver. This is not necessarily a problem depending how you look at it, but my bank account disagree. Anyway, hello, I'm back. So I haven't made a video in like, what, 2 months? So if you didn't know, I'm at film school and I shot my grad film. We shot it first half of June. Went really, really well. I'm super excited about it. Like, there are not enough words to describe how excited about it I am, how good of a goddamn time we had as a crew, like, genuinely obsessed. So in the last few months, I've acquired quite a few books because, as we know, I can't help myself. You will spot a theme with these very, very easily. We're really going on the like, so don't do it. Don't do it. Started off as like a fun, quirky joke, and now it just is an inconvenience because so many of my books are just wrecked because I dropped them. Not that we know that I treat my books very well as it is, because we were in pre-production for my grad film since about January till June. The brain space was considerably lacking for anything that wasn't just, you know, a bit more chill. So you'll find that the spread of this is very much aimed towards a little bit more mindless reading, shall we say. Many of there are still quite a few classics here, to be fair, but that's not really what I've been reading recently because my brain just needs out. Like, I just need time out. Problem with making films, right, is that it's not like, oh, I've had a really stressful day, I'm gonna watch a film to relax. Like, that's like the last thing that you want to do. I'm like, I've been thinking about a film and camera and shots and lighting and performance and just like character all bloody day. I don't want to go home and relax and do that. So instead, I bought and read a bunch of books. I've read a bunch of these already. But without any more further ado, because you know how much I bloody love a do, I'll get on with this book haul. Is there an order to this? No, there is not, so we're going to start what's at the top. I got a copy of Castiglione's Book of the Courtier. I say got rather than bought because my mummy bought this for me. My mum, myself and my dad went to see the Raphael exhibition that was at the National Gallery at the beginning of this year. Really, really good exhibition. Really, really enjoyed it. I found it just beautiful. And one of the main reasons that my mother wanted to go was that, some of you know, she's an academic. She actually produced my grad film. We all agreed my mum was the MVP of the entire shoot. So my mum produced my grad film, but her day job, shall we say, is she's an academic, specialising more in politeness. And so Castiglione, who is this guy, this painting is done by Raphael, and they good mates. But this is like part of the crux of her research. So I've had copies of this book lying around my house forever. I've never read it. To do my mother a service, I ought to. The Courtier has to imbue with grace his movements, his gestures, and his ways of doing things, and in short, his every action. The Book of the Courtier, 1528, Baldassare, strong name, Castiglione, a diplomat and papal nuncio to Rome, sets out to define the essential virtues for those at court in a lively series of imaginary conversations between the real-life courtiers to the Duke of Urbino. His speakers discuss qualities of noble behaviour, chiefly discretion, decorum, nonchalance and gracefulness, as well as wider questions such as the duties of a good government and the nature of true love. Castiglione's narrative power and psychological perception makes this guide both an entertaining comedy of manners and a revealing window onto the ideals and preoccupations of the Italian Renaissance at the moment of its greatest splendour. Part instruction manual, part treatise on life. I feel like this will gel with me in the same way that Montaigne does. And considering they're vaguely contemporary, are they? If I get this wrong, my mum will kill me. I figured this would be something that vibes very well with me, and also, I don't know, early self-help book, discuss. That is probably a bastardization of my mum's research, but it's fine. It's fine. Okay, we'll continue with some other more grown-up serious ones before we get onto the silly books on this pile. They're on my lap. Some more intellectual stuff. So at the beginning of the year I was buying more intellectual things before my brain just kind of like ran out of energy as I was doing more and more work. So you'll see like the theme of like how highbrow this is just dip as this video goes on. Anyway, I bought Foucault. I bought Foucault, A History of Sexuality, Volume 1, The Will to Knowledge. I've read a bunch of Foucault during my undergrad. I did comparative literature, but I don't actually have many of his books. I bought this and then my brother was like, you can read Foucault? I'm like, you can fuck off. Foucault is tricky. Foucault is like notoriously difficult and it's notoriously dense. And some of what he says just doesn't make sense, but if you use enough fancy words, people feel like they're supposed to understand what you're talking about and then just agree with you because they're too ashamed to admit they don't know the words you've used and therefore cannot ascertain as to whether you are in fact wrong, even if you are. Anyway. We talk about sex more and more, but are we more liberated? The first part of Michel Foucault's landmark account of our evolving attitudes in the West shows how the 19th century, far from suppressing sexuality, led to an explosion of discussion about sex as a separate sphere of life for study and examination. As a result, he argues, we are making a science of sex which is rather devout to the analysis of desire rather than the increase of pleasure. Sex is a theme that runs through a lot of what I read. If I'm reading contemporary stuff, I probably won't read it unless I know there is smut in it, because like, why else would I read it? Maybe that is an effect of having read fan fiction as early on as I did, so who knows? But there is a couple other books in here that are kind of irrelevant to that as like a philosophical treatise, shall we say. Half the books in which that plays out. Is that an intellectual way of saying half the books are philosophy on sex and the other half is just porn? Maybe. Smut. Porn. It's the same thing. This is one of the things that Foucault is most famous for, and one of the things I didn't have. And many of you know I don't like having gaps in my library. It's a little library. So let's just say intellectual peer pressure, because I felt like Foucault is somebody that I'm supposed to have read. And okay, this is one that I can't believe I didn't have. Angela Davis, Women, Race and Class. Yeah. This is one of those that I've gone to my bookshelf before to look for and then realised that I don't actually own a copy of. Ranging from the age of slavery to contemporary injustices, this seminal history of race, gender and class inequality offers an alternative view of female struggles for liberation. Tracing the intertwining histories of the abolitionist and women's suffrage movements, Davis examines the racism and class prejudice inherent in so much of white feminism, and in doing so brings to light new pioneering heroines, from field slaves to mill workers who fought back and refused to accept the lives into which they were born. I've read essays that she's done before, but I've never read this book. One of the reasons why I'm excited to read this is just because I don't want my feminism to just be white. So I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory. Whoops. Okay, we'll continue with the intellectual ones before I get down to the silly ones. By silly ones I mean, yeah. So this book I didn't know existed until one of you DM'd me a picture of it, of like an essay in a foreword of a different book. One of you sent me a bit of it and then directed me to this. So this is Angela Carter, The Sadeain Women and the Ideology of Pornography. If you've watched any of my videos, you will know that that is very up my street, which I feel like now in retrospect is a very weird thing to say in terms of like my branding. Even if the things that I like writing about the most are women, sex and power, I still find that fascinating, probably always will. You may know that I have read a lot of Saad and I don't think Saad is as bad as you may think, and the interesting thing is this history of like feminist defense of Saad. The most famous one probably being Simone de Beauvoir's Must We Burn Saad, which I still have not read, but that is not the point. So now I have Carter's Sadeain Women. The only other book of Angela Carter that I have actually is The Bloody Chamber, which is like a retelling of a lot of fairy tales in an interesting way. Sexuality is power, so says the Marquise de Sade, philosopher and pornographer extraordinaire. His virtuous Justine keeps to the rules laid down by men who reward rape and humiliation. His Juliet, Justine's triumphantly monstrous antithesis, and sister, viciously exploits her sexuality in a world where all tenderness is false, all beds are minefields. But now de Sade has met his match. With invention and genius, Angela Carter takes on these outrageous figments of de Sade's extreme imagination and transforms them into symbols of our time. The Hollywood sex goddess, mothers and daughters, pornography, even the sacred shrine of sex and marriage lies devastatingly exposed before our eyes. Angela Carter delves into a viscera of our distorted sexuality and reveals a dazzling vision of love which admits neither of conqueror nor of conquered. Power dynamics is basically what I can say about a lot of stuff like this. If you think about like a lot of pornography, a lot of sexuality, a lot of just sex is power dynamics, and then when you mix it up into like feminism and gender dynamics as well, it's really, really interesting. I'm quite fascinated to see what she has to say about this, and I do find this like an interesting thing of, yeah, this feminist defense of Saad, but this of like very well-respected intellectual women, and like the way that they defend Saad, I still think it's like fascinating, because you would just assume that they'd be like, oh, he's horrible, and they're like, no, he's fascinating. And I agree. His argument seems to be, if you look at Juliet versus Justine, Justine is the misfortunes of virtue and Juliet is the... I wrote my dissertation on this, how can I not remember it? She's the... Oh my god, how have I forgotten this? Misfortunes of virtue. Virtues of... no. Prosperities of vice. And just like the idea that if, you know, you can be as God-fearing as you like, that doesn't necessarily mean good things will happen to you. And in an atheist world, you can basically do whatever you want because nothing is going to happen to you anyway. But obviously that's looking for like a libertine mindset, which is like pleasure for the sake of pleasure, and that you can do whatever you want because you are the pinnacle of society. And by that I mean obviously like a noble, rich white man, but it's the idea that in a world where there is no God, what does morality matter? But then that does then extend into things like gender dynamics, because he then does challenge why women are seen the way that they are, especially in terms of like role. Okay, kind of like, how do I explain this? Kind of like in a world where then if men have no God to answer to, why would women then answer to men? Reductive way of explaining it, but weirdly enough, Saad is more interested in a level of free will that is so extreme, theory you can pull from it, and then also like the lesser things that happen in the book are by modern standards still weirdly very progressive. He like advocates like for a woman's right to choose about her body, for example. It's, you know, it's when Saad is more progressive than some contemporary societies when it comes to a woman's right to choose. Yeah, you have a fucking problem. Anyway, and obviously the other thing is we are bombarded with pornography like day in, day out. Yes, in like varying degrees of how explicit it is, but it is very, you know, it's a whole thing that sex sells. Like you see it in advertising, you see it in social media, you see it just constantly in every kind of content that you consume. There is a level to which that it is pornographic. I feel like understanding your relationship to that and how that then will influence like your perception of sex and your perception of sexuality is like important, and also it's like vast, because I think it's something that often we don't want to talk about because it's not proper to philosophize on pornography. Like, why would you do that? Because it impacts us on like a very primal level, day in, day out. You don't think about it that much because you think to maybe have like discussions about it might be taboo, because you are kind of talking about sex, but you're talking about like a voyeuristic consumption of sex. And nobody wants to admit to that. Yeah, so I just think it's an interesting thing to like think about, especially because the varying like ways that you can consume pornography. Any like video pornography, shall we say, is very much done under the male gaze. However, written pornography is very much done under the female gaze. I just think it's an interesting thing to think about because it affects and influences every single one of us every single day. Okay, then let's move on to not all of us smutty. Let's not get there. One of the ones that I bought because I'd seen it on BookTok, but then people had said that it was really, really good on Goodreads and stuff, is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. I hope I have said that name wrong. I'm obsessed with this cover, by the way. Super obsessed with it. I read a little bit of it and it's kind of giving 2000s Gossip Girl, which is what I'm hoping it's gonna be. We will see, of course. Oh my god, so I have started reading this. I'm about 40 pages in. This book is completely unhinged and I am so fucking here for it. I haven't read anything like this. I've only read 40 pages, so just like from a stylistic approach, it
fucking unhinged in a really enjoyable way, just like in saying all the things we're not supposed to say. And this is set in 2000, so like set in America, set in New York, so that very like kind of class obsessed, and like the way the Americans are class obsessed, and like the whole thing about like school debt and like the insane amount of like, you know, prescription drugs the Americans can get to deal with like anxiety and whatever. Like naughty's diet culture is a big one. The way she talks about money, really interesting. And I'm like thoroughly enjoying it so far, so I hope that the story itself is good, because I still feel like I'm like balls deep in an amount of setup for the first 40 pages. I can definitely see that this is one that people either love and absolutely adore, or they like don't get it and then they just fucking hate it. So I feel like this is definitely, for a lot of people, gonna be super hit or miss, but it's fucking unhinged and I'm really enjoying it. Like the blurb on the back that Vogue wrote is like, it often teeters into like absolute lunacy, and I'm like, yes it does. It feels like written with the objective of like unfiltered, unhinged thoughts, because they are on so much medication. Like, I see it, get it, totally there. What is this book? I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It is really well written. Or like the style that she's using, it's fucking great. I'm really enjoying it. I've seen it a lot also on like those like TikTok book lists that are like, point of view, you are the problem. Yeah, this is definitely one of those.
I really think this is going to be so up my street, especially just because of the point of my life that I am in, being like, you know, a single 20-something in a big city. Like, it's exciting stuff. Young, thin, pretty, a recent Columbia graduate, an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan paid for by her inheritance, our narrator has many of the advantages of life, but there is a vacuum at the heart of things, and it isn't just the loss of her parents, or the way her Wall Street boyfriend treats her, or her sadomasochistic friendship with her best friend. It's the year 2000 in the world's greatest city, a glitter with wealth and possibility. What could be so terribly wrong? That like kind of elitism that you can excuse with like, oh, but they're still depressed like everyone else, like where mental health is used to like ground them and like validate that they're also people, but then they're still also elitist. That's like an interesting little like loophole of like humanizing what is sometimes terrible characters, but then sometimes we just need to read about terrible characters. I don't know, I have not read this yet. But that's more of a commentary on Gossip Girl than anything else. Kind of hoping that's what this is going to give, honestly. And I am living for 2000s nostalgia. Mainly because I was a child and the world seemed so much bigger then, obviously, and you're like fascinated by everything because you understand nothing. Not that I know shit now. It's so easy to be hypnotized by like glamour because you just didn't understand, you didn't see the mist and smoke yet. So I'm hoping that's the aesthetic. I will probably really enjoy this. Once I have put my current obsession on hold, I'll probably dive into this next. A star for this cover is honestly fantastic. But yes, this is something I bought because BookTok told me to. Shut up. So this is one that I've seen on a lot of like the sort of anti-racism reading lists from, is that already last summer or was that already the summer before? When we had a lot more of the Black Lives Matter protests, and then there were so many reading lists of like anti-racism, the idea of like not being racist isn't enough. You should also actively do things to unwind and sort of like work through your own, as a white person anyway, work through like your own biases, your own unconscious biases, and just, you know, listen and be more empathetic and understanding. This is one that I saw on a lot of reading lists and talked about a lot. Me and My White Supremacy, How to Recognize Your Privilege, Combat Racism and Change the World by Layla F. Saad. This is a quote from Florence Given on the back, so At this time in history, more than ever, people are asking what they can do to help dismantle white supremacy and where to begin. Layla F. Saad answers, begin within, begin with you and your white supremacy. One of the most talked about books of 2020, Me and My White Supremacy teaches readers how to dismantle the privilege within themselves so they can stop, brackets, often unconsciously, inflicting damage on people of colour and in turn help other white people do better too. I enjoy the brackets, often unconsciously that's on the back just to make white people feel better about it. I don't know, I just think you can always do better, and there are always going to be things that you don't understand, even when you're trying to be like your most empathetic and understanding. And like, okay, yeah, sure, being a woman is a struggle bus, but I'm still a white woman, and there are a lot of things that I will never understand. If we want to talk again about the whole thing of like emotional labour, when talking about stuff like this, I do think books are a very, very good place to start, because they also financially benefit the person who has put in that work. Put your money where your mouth is. Where your brain is. Not that enough people do that. Right. These are real silly and I'm excited about it. Like I already said, I had to turn my brain off for most of this year when it came to reading because my energy was very much being directed to my grad film. So it just kind of meant that I wanted to read and switch off, but maybe read something a bit more. This is the third one in the Dirty Air series. Dirty Air is like a sort of rom-com-y romance smut series, but it's set within the world of F1, and the main protagonists are all very, very not discreetly based on current drivers on the grid. Do you want to take a guess at who this one is about? This is Lauren Asher's third book in the series called Wrecked. These are the alternative covers because usually they look like this. Yeah, who do you think this book is meant to be about? Anyway, Elaine, I beg the universe to save me from my financial disaster. It was a call from a Formula One team desperate for a PR miracle. One season, one job, one broody British racer. Except that Jax turns our hotel room into a battleground. To beat the enemy, I need to find his weakness. What I learn threatens to ruin everything. Him. Me. Us. Love is a war zone and neither one of us plans to surrender. This is the third one. It's just because I don't want to read F1 fanfiction. That is purely what this stems from. Jax. Pills, alcohol, adrenaline. I'm addicted to the destructive decisions that numb my pain. Until one night when I make a catastrophic mistake. To repair my broken reputation, my team hires Elena, an overpaid babysitter set on ruining my plans. She's a damnation disguised as my salvation and my newest addiction. What I have heard, albeit from Book Talk, is that the first two books, Throttled and Collided, very unsubtly based on Charles Leclerc and Mick Schumacher. However, I did not read the second one as Mick Schumacher. In my head it was Nico Rosberg, so that's completely irrelevant. This is very obviously based on Lewis Hamilton, if you had not already clocked that. I think the last one in this series is based on Carlos Sainz, so if anybody needed to know that. But what I have heard on Book Talk is that apparently the third and the fourth book are actually much, much better written, apparently, or at least have more substantial storylines, because this one is meant to be based a bit around addiction and recovery. The last one in the series is meant to be based a bit more around redemption, rather than just a straight up rom-com vibe. In the first one, it's more of like a, you know, brother's best friend one, and then the second one was more friends to lovers one, but apparently this isn't meant to be like that, so I'm hoping this is a little bit better. The main thing is that I, like with the other two books, I just want the smut. This is not particularly well written, even on the smut side, but it's explicit enough that I don't care. These don't take much energy to read, and that is why I continue to deign to read them, and I just really enjoy the setting of a story world. Basically, that is why I've read two of those, and now I'm gonna finish reading the entire series. That is the other thing about a series is, once I have committed, I have an alarming level of follow through. So I bought all of the ACOTAR books, and I have read 3.5 of them. I read this one in a week. If you're new, I am dyslexic. This book is 700 pages. I read a 700-page book in a week. I don't do that. I straight up don't do that. I will do an entire video reviewing these and the first one separately. I'm saving this one until later, so stay tuned for that. So I bought the first one, enjoyed it, and then was like, I need to read the second one. Was obsessed with it, and then continued my obsession through to the third one. And now I'm reading the fourth one, this one, and that's alright. So really, it's just a case of, I bought one and then I had to read the rest of all of them. So the first one is A Court of Thorns and Roses. The second one is A Court of Mist and Fury. The third one is A Court of Wings and Ruin. The fourth one I'm currently reading is A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is or the fourth one or the 3.5 one, depending on how you want to look at it. It feels more like a short story rather than the continuation of the main story that runs through these. We are all from Feyre's perspective, who has climbed north of the wall separating the human territories from the Feylands, kills a fairy, and then has to come and live in fairy world. Pyrinthia? Pyrinthia. Pyrinthia. What is it called? I keep calling it Pyrinthia, but I don't know if that's right or not. I am dyslexic. I can't do the made up names of high fantasy. I can't do it. But these are all from Feyre's perspective, and I call her Freya, even though I know her name is Feyre. And this is from Nessa's perspective, which is her older sister. This, I got curious, so I read a couple of pages of this. This is well written. I'm very excited to read this. The first book in ACOTAR, by the way, it's not that well written. These two are significantly better written. This is fine. Bit of fluff. This is like kind of epic war invasion narrative. It's trying to go for epic. I don't think it fully goes there, but it's doing its best. And it's just like a fun high fantasy fairy series, but like not young adult, kind of more new adult. It's fairy porn. Well, what do you want? I don't need to sell it to you anymore. It's fairy porn. Not as much as other people told me it was, so that was slightly disappointing. But I have really, really enjoyed these. And obviously the other thing is you can't see that from there, I've annotated every single one of these and it's been thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyable. Are these the best thing ever written? Some of them are fairly decent, to be honest. I just don't read series because this intimidates the fuck out of me, but this has just been delightfully entertaining. I'll read you the blurb for the second one, which is this is so far, in my opinion, this is the best one. Feyre is immortal. She has rescued her lover Tamlin from the sadistic fairy queen and now possesses fey powers beyond imagining. But Feyre cannot forget the destruction she wrought to save her beloved, nor the bargain she made with Riesland, High Lord of the feared Night Court. And as Feyre is drawn deeper into Riesland's world, she senses a dark pain in his heart that echoes her own. For good or ill, Feyre must embrace the changes within her. War is looming and only the full might of her new powers can save the people she loves. Epic haters to lovers arc. It's top. It is excellent. Yeah, it just made me very aware that I'm very alone reading Feyre and Riesland's arc, but that's fine, isn't it? Perfectly alright. Just wanted some silly stuff, and you'll get a video dedicated to these. Not this one because I'm saving this later. So if you have any particular things you'd like me to talk about, cover, RE, that series. Not about the males, females bit, okay? Too many people have already asked me about that. They're not men, it's because they're fairies, they're not men and women, so you can't use men and women, so they're male and female. It's not as bad as everyone I think thinks it is. So yeah, that is pretty much everything that I have bought recently. You'll get an update on what I've read recently, but it pretty much just sort of slips from intellectual into horny and unhinged. That's how my summer is going. I hope everyone else is enjoying their 2022 summer. What hot girl summer. Do let me know if you have read any of these, if you're planning on reading any of these, if you've been inspired to chase any of these. Again, I'm sorry. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing very, very well. I'm very glad to be back. It's been a while. Let me know what you guys are reading at the moment, and I will try and make more videos for you soon. If you have any requests, of course, leave them down below. Thank you very, very much for watching. Like, subscribe, and all the jazz, and I will see you guys hopefully very, very soon. Goodbye. The gist of this list is basically that Emma needs a boyfriend or a girlfriend pretty fucking soon because I am alone. Okay, that's fine.